I've got here an undercoated Stormcast Sequitor that I'm going to start painting up. I'm going to do it very much like the scheme on the Games Workshop website. I will be going with gold armour, but with a different recipe. Blue shoulder pads, blue inner robe, cream outer robe. This will be metallic. This will be red rather than the sort of deep burgundy on the site. A little bit of jewellery to pick out. I'll do the scenic base separately, but I'm going to come back in a minute and we're going to start putting on the metallic coats. So I'll be back in a minute to apply the first coat of paint. I'm now going to apply the first coat of Balthasar Gold using a standard layer brush. So I'm going to pick out all of the gold and give it a coat. I've thinned the gold down a little bit, not massively. Metallics normally cover a little better than some of the other paints, so I may not have to do a second thin coat. But what I want to do is have good coverage on all of the gold parts. So some of the haft of the weapon is gold, the arms are gold, the feet are gold, and when you get under here, the bits that aren't covered by the robes are gold. So I'm going to keep going until I've done all of the gold and given it a solid coat. If I need to, I will come back and do a second coat, but then I'll come back and I'll show you the wash. So I'll be back in a moment. I'm now going to apply a wash of Drippy Violet to the model. Making sure to get it in all the little gaps. So I'll apply this to all the gold that I've put down, and then I'll come back when it's dry and we can start highlighting it back up. So I'll be back in a minute when that's all applied and dried. With the ink wash dry, I'm now going to apply a heavy dry brush of Balthasar Gold, which was the original colour. So what this means is that the ink wash will then be restricted to the crevices of the model. So it will still be there, but it will bring back much of the original colour. So I'm going to do this across the whole model, and then I'm going to come back for the next part. So I'm now going to apply a dry brush of Sycorax Bronze. You can apply the Balthasar Gold and the Sycorax Bronze as standard paint. I'm doing dry brushing because it's much quicker, but you can do it as standard paint. And get much more control over what you're doing. So I'm just after a dry brush that brings out a shine on all the edges, the fingers, and the visible leg plates. Doing so as a quick dry brush with Sycorax Bronze is a fairly quick step, whilst still being fairly effective. So this is the last stage of the Sigmarite armour for this model. So I'm going to finish doing this, and then I'll come back and we'll do the metal of the axe head. So I'm now going to apply a little steel to the head of the mace. This is a fairly simple step that is really just about being neat. So apply a reasonably thin coat. Probably just one is necessary because of how well metallics cover a black undercoat. But the important thing is to be neat. I'm going to come back afterwards and apply a wash, and again follow similar steps to what we did with the armour. With that dry, I'm going to apply a wash of Nuln Oil to the mace head, and then leave that to dry for a moment. Because I'm going to be heavily going over it with a dry brush of steel again in a minute, that wash can cover quite a lot, because I'm going to pare it back down to really just the various crevices and detail of the model in a minute. Leaving some definite lines, particularly in this detailing here and around the rivets. So I'll be back in a second when this is dry. So I'm now going to dry brush a little bit of steel onto the mace head. So you can see how quickly that gives the desired effect, and you end up with even more contrast. So there we go, and the next step from that is going to be a layer of highlight. I'll be back with that in a second. So I'm now going to apply the highlight. I'm not going to dry brush it. I am just going to take a little silver and run it along the edges where it would catch the light. Doing so draws a little more attention to the mace head. And provides a little more definition to the weapon. So I'm going to finish this, and that's the mace done. So I'm now starting on the cloth, and I'm starting with a base of cantore blue. So much of the cloth on these fellows is blue in the studio scheme, so I'm going to start doing that. Also, both of these shoulder pads. So, and you see as the shoulder pads start to get filled in, the model becomes more colourful. You start getting closer to something you can put on the tabletop. But you can also see from how well the metallics covered the black why I started with the metallics. So as I do the blue, I'm going to get all the blue done, and then I'm going to come back to shade it. So with 2 thin coats of blue, I'm ready to apply some shade. So I'm applying Assaman Blue Wash, which has been replaced with Drakenhof Nightshade, but I haven't replaced it because I've still got some of the blue wash left. So this is going to be a wash over all the blue armour pieces and cloth, and then I'm going to let that dry. I'll be back in a second to start layering up. So I'm now going to apply some Calidor Sky Blue. I'm going to do this not as a dry brush, but line highlights on the robes. So I'm just going to pick out the raised areas to give a gradation on the blue, like so. So I'm going to do this with all the cloth and the armour plates, and I'll come back when it's dry for the next part. I'm now going to start the cloth with a base of Zandri dust. So there's quite a bit of cloth to do on this model, so I'm going to get that done, and then I'm going to come back and do the wash. So with 2 thin coats of Zandri dust applied, I'm now ready to add an Agrax Earthshade wash. So I'm making sure to get this into the recesses where it's a little thick. I'm going back and taking some more of the wash off in order to apply it where it needs to go. So I'm going to make sure this is on, and then I'm going to leave it to dry. Then I'm going to come back and start layering the cream robes. So I'll be back with that in a second. With the ink wash dry, I've got some Ashtabi bone, which I will use for the first layer of highlights. So I'm going to go over the edges of the model, but still leave a bit of space to go over with a finer line highlight afterwards. So I'm going to finish this, and I'll be back in a minute. So now comes a final highlight of Screaming Skull, just to bring out the very edges of the robes. So there's plenty of contrast already. There's shadows in the depths, and it's going to look good from gaming distance, so about 2 feet away. So I'm just going to polish this off, and then it's just some minor details to do. With detailing left to do, I'm going to start doing things like the weapon haft, which I'm painting corn red. And the leather that comes out from underneath the robe, which I'm also painting corn red, that will give a different finishing effect. So I'll be back when these are done. I'm now going to do the little string of beads. I actually am going to do that gold using the Retributor gold. And the little hammer and anvil, sorry, lightning and anvil symbol. And again, the little anvil symbol here. So, as you can see, I need to do some line highlighting on the haft and a little line highlighting on the leather in this, but then everything else, apart from a little detail here, is done. So with the model almost completed, this is what tabletop standard looks like. There's only 5 major colours: gold, silver, blue, cream and red. They've all had a base, a wash and a highlight, but from gaming distance of about 2 feet away it looks pretty good, and when you've got a unit of them together it will look coherent. So I've only got this reliquary to do and a little detailing on the leather and the weapon haft, and maybe this bit here, and then it's done. But that's the sort of level of paint job you can achieve quite quickly and without a huge number of different paints. As you can see, I've finished the Sequitor. I've painted up a scenic base for him, and I've done that in a separate video, and I've glued him to it. This is tabletop standard basically. I didn't show painting this little item here, which I painted Celestra Grey, gave a wash of Nihilac Oxide, and then painted the bands around it silver. I also picked out the little studs in the leather with silver as well. But this is what tabletop standard looks like. You've got, most of it is base coat, wash, layer, sometimes base coat, wash, layer, highlight. But while the paint job is simple and it's actually going to be pretty quick to turn out a full unit of 10 of these, it does look good at gaming distance. So it'll look pretty decent when you've got units of 10 of these moving across the table. If you can do a paint job to this level, then you can have a coherent, well-painted army pretty quick. Yeah, I think this is a scheme that will do quite well on my Stormcast. I like it. But yeah, things to note: the armour is going to be one of the highlights and one of the things that you can see from a great distance, as are the robes, so pay some attention to those. Make sure they look reasonable. The weapon is always the centre of attention, the face is always the centre of attention. But yeah, look at it from above. You've got the shoulder pads, again you can see where the highlights are picked out, and you can see it from almost gaming distance, probably about 1.5 foot. But if you were to look at it from a little further away, some of the detail is a bit less noticeable, so if I'd highlighted that you wouldn't even be able to see it. It looks good. I very much like the miniatures. I think they're so much better than the first generation of Stormcast, and I think they're going to be very simple to paint up. The inclusion of the robes and the little bits and bobs, so the leather, the beads with the symbol, the little reliquaries, adds a lot to the model. So yeah, I really like these. Looking forward to using them in a game, and they're quick to paint up, so I'm looking forward to collecting the starter set army and putting it all together. If you've liked this video, hit like or subscribe. If you've got a strong opinion, leave a comment below. Otherwise, good gaming.